how to calculate how much you can offer on a property. A couple things we're going to be covering today is the approach for different properties. How are you going to be investing in these properties is going to make a determination on how you're going to buy the property. We also need to talk about a little bit of how to estimate the resale value, resale price, and how to estimate rehab costs, because those are going to have a very big impact on how much you can pay for that property. There's also a few other factors that we need to talk about as we're looking at an offer amount, and we are going to get into that today. So first things first, what are your goals with a property? What are you trying to accomplish with a property? And I'll tell you, I like to see what's best for the property. How can I make the most amount of money with this property and then decide my strategy? You may say, I'm just looking for cash flow, or you may say, I just need cash. So those are things that you can look at. It's your personal situation. But there's a couple things you can do with a property. You can wholesale the property. If you're wholesaling the property, you're going to have to get the very best deal because somebody else is going to have to make money. You'll put it on a contract, sell that contract to somebody else, and then that person needs to make a profit either as a rental property or as a fix and flip. So there's got to be what we call meat on the bone. If there's not, you're not going to be able to do a wholesale deal because a wholesale deal is buying it even cheaper and then passing part of that deal on to somebody else. Now, fix and flips, okay? A fix and flip, you can pay a little higher than you can with a wholesale price, and you buy the property to improve the value and you want to sell for a profit. The key here is, what are the things I can do to improve that value and how much is it going to cost me to do it? We'll talk more about that here in just a minute. Now, one of the strategies that I really encourage that I don't think is used enough is turning these into BRRRR or rental type properties. This is typically the highest that you can actually pay is doing a BRRRR type of a property, but you buy the property, you fix it up, you rent it, and then you keep it as a rental property. So that's one of the things that I really encourage for a lot of people because you want to start building that cash flow. Okay, let's talk about wholesale offers. Person you are selling to needs to make money. If you are selling somebody, they've got to make money. You have to buy at a price that they can do a fix and flip or a rental and still make a profit. You need to understand how much money they need to make as to profit for you to determine how much you can pay for the property. So typically fix and flips want to make about 10% of the resale price on the property. So let's say that the resale price of the property is going to be $250,000. They're typically going to want to make $25,000. So that would put $225,000 minus the fix ups, minus the agent fees, minus all the costs. And we're going to be getting into those costs here in just a minute. Obviously more is better. Rentals are mostly looking to have positive cash flow. So as we're talking about rentals or BRRRR properties, it's typically more about the cash flow than it is about the cost. Obviously, they're not going to want to overpay for a property, but they're not going to have to get 30% discount on a property as long as they can cash flow and make some money and feel like they're getting a decent deal. So what do you need to know? Well, a few things to determine what you can pay. Your proposed purchase price. How much are you thinking you're going to be buying this property for? You need to have estimated repairs. What's going to cost you to fix this property up? And you also need to know what the property is going to cost, what the property is going to sell for once the repairs are actually done to the property. Or if you're doing a BRRRR type rental, what would that property refinance? What would the appraisal come in a refinance when you do what's called a rate and term refinance? I find that most people overestimate the value of the property and underestimate the amount of rehab. Okay, let me say that again. Overestimate the value. So if the property is really worth 100, they're thinking, hey, it's going to be 125. Okay, they're overestimating the value. Also, they underestimate the rehab. If you think the rehab is going to be 50, well, it may turn into 70. Those are two mistakes I see, and we're going to tackle those and talk about some ways that we can avoid those mistakes. And you've got to be going in like a detective. You cannot fall in love with your property and think it's going to lead you to the promised land. You need to be critical of it and make sure it passes all those tests before you move forward on a property like that. So one of the things you got to do is you've got to choose good comps. What I say is you've got to take the lower of actives. Actives are homes that are on the market for sale, and solds are homes that have actually closed. I like to take the lower of actives or solds. And there's a couple of things that I'm looking for. I want to look for no more than 6 months. I would prefer it was last week. The closer to it, the better. I also want to make sure square footage isn't more than 20%, because if I've got a house that has 2,000 square feet, I'm going to go up to 2,400 and down to 1,600, because I don't want to be looking at 5,000 square foot properties and trying to do some deductive reasoning to come to a price. Now, I prefer a half a mile distance, and I want to be in the same property class: house, condo, row home, those types of things. I want to look at the sold properties. Now, if you look at the maps, one of the things that the heat maps can do for you is make determinations on where there are boundaries. And these are called natural boundaries, okay? So with the natural boundaries that are there, it could be a road, it could be a school district line, it could be all kinds of things that could be a natural boundary. But really, and a perfect example, and we don't say this enough, but on 700 East here in Salt Lake, if you're east of 7th East, your property is worth more than if it's west of 7th East. And it could only be a block difference, but it's just going to be worth more because there's a natural barrier there, a natural boundary there, which has a price difference. Why? I don't know. But that's just the way that it is. And that's some of the local knowledge. And that's one of the things that heat maps can actually help you do in making determinations. So click the listed amount from low to high, because you want to start with the least expensive that have sold, and then we'll go do the same thing for actives. And you click on each property, you open it up, and what we're looking at is the beds, the baths, the square footage. We look at the pictures. Lots of sold properties, we're going to be able to find pictures to get an idea of the quality. I also like to go and take a look at the MLS sold notes. What do the agents say about the property? Like if you go look at the MLS notes and it's like, this property's an investor special, this property needs some tender loving care, well, I know the property needs some work. But when they're like gorgeous remodeled countertops with tile black backsplash and gold plated toilets, and you know what I'm talking about there. But when I see that type of stuff, then I'm like, okay, this is a property's in really good shape. I use the pictures, I use the notes, and I do the best that I can. Then I document all of that in what's called a comps worksheet. So I make a determination as to, hey, which comps make the most sense. But then I do the same thing because I want to determine the as-is value, the FHA value, and the ARV value. What's the property worth the way it sits right now? What's the property worth when it's fixed up to an FHA quality, which is not the high end? And what is it at an after repair value quality? And I'm going to select the 3 or 4 best comps that fit those. And once I find 3 or 4 comps that fit that, that's where I stop. I don't keep looking. I find most people do the reverse. They say, what's the most expensive property that's sold in this area? Oh yeah, my property's kind of close to that. Then my property will probably sell for just a little bit less than that. That's not how you do it. If there are other properties that have sold for less money, that's what you need to be using as your value. Now, is there a chance you could get more money out of your property? Yeah, there's a chance. Should that be your strategy? No, chance is not a strategy. So we want to make sure that we are documenting that and we have solid comps to justify that. Now, you do that with actives, or do that with sold properties, and you do the same thing with active properties. It's the same type of thing that we're going for. Date range in 6 months, square footage, same things we talked about, but we're just doing that with an active property list instead of a sold property list. And then you look at the map to determine what comparables are in the same neighborhood. What's in the same neighborhood? What's not in the same neighborhood? We go from low to high, just like we did with the sold properties. We start with the least expensive. We look at the beds, the baths, the square footage. Does this look familiar, guys? This is exactly what we were doing with the sold properties. We're doing the same process, and we're trying to find the best comps. Once we find those 3 to 4, we stop. We don't keep going up. We've sorted from lowest to highest. And once we find those three's ideal, then we stop. And that's going to give us an idea of the price range. That's going to give us an idea of what are we going to be able to resell this property for. It's also going to give us a really good idea of the quality of workmanship we're going to need in the property that we want to fix up. And so then we'll know what needs to be done to the property to be competitive with the neighborhood that is there. All right, rehab amount. This is the next topic that I find a lot of people miss the mark. Rehab starts with scope. What are you going to do to the property? And I can tell you, if you miss things on a scope, it's going to cost you. Don't overlook things. Don't try and downplay things. Make sure your scope of work has the work that needs to be done on the property. Determine what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done. Determine the quality of workmanship. This will be different for a rehab than for a fix and flip. This will be different for a rental. So, it's going to be different. If it's a $100,000 flip versus a $500,000 flip, you're going to have differences. But the great thing is you can find out what you need to do by looking at those comparables. You determine that, look at the comparables, what is the finished product, and you want your property to be just like that one, except for I like to add one little extra. If everything has vinyl floors, I like to add tile or something like that to make it just a little bit nicer without costing me a whole lot more money. You don't want to do that everywhere, but you do want to do that in one place. Repairs, interior paint, flooring, kitchen, bathrooms, door packages, demolition, trim packages, landscaping, those are all things that are typical repairs. And these things are usually the cheapest to do and get you the biggest bang for your buck. You get the most value out of those things with putting the least amount of money into them. So we're able to get a higher leverage point on those things. Also, properties sell faster and they also appraise better as those things are done. But there are different levels of repairs. So what I'm going to do is show you a down and dirty way to kind of look at some repair costs. You are not going to want to use this to close on the property. You're going to want to get contractors' bids, but this will give you an idea of where you're looking at. So I look at this, there's rental repairs, there's light, there's medium, there's heavy. Okay, so I'm going to put light, medium, or heavy. Rental repair quality. Paint or carpet, $2 to $3. And with the market right now, I would say more on the $3. Now, this is not the square feet of the carpet. This is the square feet of the house. So if the house is 1,000 square feet, I'm going to plan on $3,000 to paint the house. If I'm going to carpet the house, I'm going to plan on $3,000. Cleanup, I'm going to plan on $2,000. Miscellaneous landscape, 1 to 6. I'm going to say, I think it's probably more like a 3 or a 4. Great. So your average is about $10 a square foot. But this is just rent ready. This is like leave what's there, put a little lipstick on a pig. That's what we're talking about there. Now, light repairs is we're doing a little bit more. We're doing a light kitchen or maybe some light bathroom remodel, those types of things. So I would be using the higher end of these, and you're averaging $14 a square foot. 10 to 18 is kind of the total there. So I would decide where you think yours would fall. Now, medium and interior budget, we're talking about new bathrooms, we're talking about new kitchens, we're talking about new trim packages. And again, we're talking about the square foot of the property. With something like that, you're going to be somewhere between $19 and $33 a square foot. So if it's a 1,000 square foot property, you're looking at $33,000, somewhere between $19,000 and $33,000. Now, again, this is a quick and dirty, so you can run and say, how much can I actually pay for the property? Now, if the property needs heavy repairs, we've got the light rehab of $19 to $30. Plus, we've got like HVAC systems, electrical systems, plumbing, water heater. So from there, you're like $26 to $48 a square foot with an average of about $37 a square foot. Now, again, we're talking square feet of the property. If the property is 1,000 square feet, is the carpet exactly 1,000 square feet? No. How many square feet does the property have? Times that by the 37. If it's 1,000 square feet and I need heavy rehab, I'm going to plan on $37,000. That's what I'm going to use to actually make my my bids or make my offer, know how much I can pay. And then during my due diligence period, I'm going to get my contractors out there. We're going to nail down the scope and we're going to nail down the actual cost for each one of those items. So, rental, $6 to $14, light, 10 to 18, medium, 19 to 33, and heavy, 26 to 48, depending about what you're doing. And we gave kind of different classifications of what those were. Repair budgets for small homes. One of the things you can get in trouble on is if the square foot is small, like 1,000 square feet. So you have to be careful with that with your total budget, because if the house is too small, like under 850 square feet, your budget's going to end up being too small. So if your square footage is less than that, just be careful. I don't recommend doing properties that are less than 2 bedrooms. I prefer 3 beds, 2 baths. But if the house is way too big, you can also get into this. So if it's over 2,400, I would probably even say closer to 3,000. The budget might get a little big. But again, this is to get us closer to what we are going to be at when we actually get our contractors bid. Now, you might want to use Investor's Edge to dial in your budgets for some of those bigger or smaller homes because it can help you in making some determinations. Now, let's talk about some next steps. Let's take the scope of work and let's meet with some general contractors. You're not going to know the real cost until you actually meet with those general contractors. And then what you're going to do is you're going to look at all the different costs associated with actually doing a deal, like attorney's fees and titles fees and compliance fees. And you're going to look at doc prep. You're going to look at payoff. Let's see here. You're going to look at project management fees. You're going to look at tax credits. You're going to look at tax escrows. You're going to look at let's see, servicing fees. You're going to look at an LLC creation, title fees, title transfer taxes. Those are all fees that you probably don't think about. One of the things that we did is we built an advanced deal analysis software so that those things are actually there to make it easy for you to do. But those are the types of things you need to put in. And then based upon that, it tells you how much you can buy this property for. So in this instance, the loan amount would be $175. There's $180 needed. So you'd have to come up with $5,800. If you could buy the property for $170 instead of $175, then you would be closer to a no money out of pocket type deal. So the question is, how much can you actually offer? Well, it depends on how much profit you want to make. It's going to depend on how much cash to close you want to bring. If you're willing to bring more cash to close, you pay a little more for it. If you can't bring any cash to close, you're going to have to find an even better deal. So the better the deal, the lower cash to close. The better the deal, the better the profit margin that you're having, which is why we've put this advanced deal analysis software to do all this heavy lifting for you, but you are still going to have to make those determinations on how much the rehab's going to be and what it's going to sell. So let's do a quick recap here, guys. What have you learned? You've learned how to identify your goal with the property. What do you want to do? You want to do BRRRR, you want to do fix and flip, you want to do wholesale. That determines your strategy and approach as to how much you can pay. With a wholesale, that's the lowest amount you can offer. Fix and flip is higher than a wholesale, and a BRRRR or rental property is typically the highest that you can pay for a property. Identify your goals with the property. Let's see. We went through those strategies. Sorry, I hit that twice. What you need to know is your proposed purchase price, your rehab cost, your after repaired value, and you're going to find comparables using Investor's Edge to make that. You want to use the lower of the shoulder actives. And then you determine the rehab level. With that rehab level, you'll talk about the full scope. You'll then look at the comparables to see what your property needs to look like. Then you take the scope of work to a contractor to find the real cost, and then the cash to close and what effect that will actually have on your profit margin. So these are things that we need to look at when you're determining what you can pay for a property in today's market.